Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, 10 Things You Didn't Know About Appium and What's New in Appium 1.5. We are delighted to host our featured presenter, Dan Cuellar. Dan is the creator of the leading open source mobile automation framework, Appium, and the head of testing at Foodit. If you have any questions, we are going to be holding a Q&A session at the end of the hour with Dan, and we'll be joined by a few other Appium and testing experts. Jonathan Lips is the Chief Architect of Appium and Director of Engineering at Sauce Labs, and Daniel Putterman is the R&D Director at Applitools. My name is Christina Lyle, and I'll be moderating today's session. You can contact me in the chat panel or Q&A box if you have any technical issues or questions. The Q&A panel is also the best place to submit questions you have for Dan, Jonathan, or Daniel as Dan goes through his presentation. We'll get to as many questions as we can in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the hour. We are recording this session today, so once it's ready, you'll receive an email with the links to the recording and the slides. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started and pass over to Dan.
All right. Good morning, Americans. Good evening, Europeans, and whatever else it is in India. Thanks for coming. I'm Dan, and I'll be doing the presentation today. And as was mentioned earlier, as Christina mentioned, I created Appium, or what is now called Appium, about 4 years ago. And so I'm going to tell you a bit about 10 things you didn't know about it. And so, like I said, I created Appium a few years ago, but it's part of a large open source community maintains it these days, so I do very little of the coding these days, and there's a bunch of great people at other companies that do that. I am head of software testing at Foodit in London. Previously, I headed testing at Shazam and Zeus, and I worked on Microsoft Office way back. And I went to a school called Carnegie Mellon where I got my BS in computer science. So anyways, we're here to talk about Appium, and whenever I talk about Appium, I always like to sort of start from the beginning. And so let's start from the beginning and sort of talk about how we got to where we are today, which is Appium 1.5. So it all started with what I call the most terrifying 5 words in testing, and that's these 5 words, available on the App Store. So back in 2008, Apple decided to open up their App Store so that anyone could write a mobile app for iOS. And with that came a lot of problems. So we've gotten used to websites where you can change the code out regularly just by deploying new code to the server, and all your customers will get your new code. And the App Store flipped things back around to the days when software was shipped on CDs and things like that. You may remember these, some of you older people there, like me. Wherein that if you submitted a bad build to the App Store and there were bugs with it, you just had to live with it until you could get a new build approved by Apple and placed in their store. And then all of your customers would have to opt in to download your fixes. So mistakes are much more costly on mobile than they are on the web because you can't patch them as easily, at least on iOS. So I was at a job where we had just gotten 2 new mobile apps for iOS and Android, and we were doing quite well. We were starting to make a lot of money on them. But the problem would come that all this great money we were making would go away when we'd have a bug. And so my first job taking the test manager role was to solve this. And I thought to myself, well, what did we do when I worked on other products? Well, we automated things. And so I looked around at all the tools available at the time, and everything was terrible. No offense to any of these tools, but they each have their own drawbacks. Instruments, JavaScript, was very sandboxed, and you had to write static JavaScript to test your Objective-C application. Robotium is just not really there, and then we'll go into PhoneMonkey, but those of you who used it know it's not a pleasure to use. And so there was room for a new tool, and so I asked my boss for a few weeks' time to go and try and make something better, and Appium was born out of that. So what is Appium? Appium is an implementation of the Selenium JSON wire protocol that controls native and hybrid iOS and Android applications. That will soon change, but we'll talk about later in 10 things you didn't know about Appium. And it is currently the most popular open source mobile automation framework. It has a pretty simple philosophy. We use only standardized and sanctioned APIs and techniques. That's still mostly true. There's a few rules being bent there, here and there, but in general, we tend to use UI Automator for Google, and we use UI Automation for iOS, which are both the vendor-provided frameworks for automation. It allows you to code in the language of your choice. Most other frameworks require you to use Ruby or Objective-C or choose one, and we wanted to support everything. And by adopting the Selenium protocol, we support that. We don't force you to modify your application under tests, so you'll never have to ask the developer to install some sort of proxy server or SDK or retrofit it with some kind of debugging code. We just use the same application you put in the store. And lastly, it's free and open source, and it works just like Selenium works. We have a server. You send it requests using the JSON wire protocol. We then ferry those on over to the application you're testing in the form of a sanctioned API called UI Automator or UI Automation JavaScript. And then we ferry the response back to you for what's happened. So let's skip that. So over the last 3 years, Appium has garnered 3,000 stars and 2,000 forks on GitHub. It is one of the top, I believe, 200 most forked projects on GitHub at the moment. So keep forking, and if everyone who's watching this who hasn't forked Appium would fork, maybe we can break the top 100. But doing a little less well with the stars. We have over 150 people who contributed a patch to Appium, and over 5,000 commits to the project. It's probably closer to 10,000, but it's a little hard to add it up now that there are so many different projects in the Appium space on GitHub. Over 150,000 people downloaded Appium 1.0. I'm curious to see what 1.5 will look like. Now that we have better ways to track the numbers than we did then. And we've closed over 3,000 issues. So let's, first, I wanted to talk about what's new in Appium 1.5. And the answer might be disappointing to some of you, but the answer is not a lot. It was a total rewrite of our entire code base. We've fitted it up with continuous integration unit tests. One new feature is that now one server will do multiple sessions. Before you worked around that issue by running 2 servers, so it wasn't the hardest thing to work around. Command line arguments have been mostly replaced with capabilities, and we have a proper code of conduct and governance with a random German character at the end of it. So why did we rewrite? This doesn't sound very exciting, but it is. It's actually really, really exciting because Appium is going to start to move very quickly now. We had 3 years of patches and organic growth. When I wrote the first version of Appium, it was in Python. And then I moved it over to .NET to integrate it with my code at work. And then I moved it back to Python when we started working at Sauce Labs with it. And then it's been since ported to Node.js. And then on top of that, it was never intended to support Android at the time. Android was sort of pushed in later, and then more and more things kept getting pushed in. And over the course of 3 years, we built up a code base that was very brittle and unstable and the source of much frustration for many of our users. And so that's fixed now. I can tell you that's fixed. We have unit testing on everything. The code is properly modularized, and it is no longer callback hell, and it uses modern ES7 JavaScript, and uses, or ES8, for which one it is, and async await pattern, all that stuff. So no more callback pyramids, no more one little change breaking a bunch of other things. Those days are over now, and that's why it's exciting. But what's really exciting is what it enables us to do now. And a lot of this stuff is going to come very quickly. Oh, I should show you. These are some graphs that Jonathan created for what the new architecture looks like. They're not really all that readable on this slide deck, but it's sane now. You can make a graph about it. Before, it would have looked like a ball of hay or a ball of yarn or something. So there's actually a division of responsibility now, which is great. So what's coming next is really exciting. Windows Phone and Windows 10 support is coming soon. There are some people very close to those products working on it right now. I think that's all I can say about it, but it's being built by some people who really know what they're doing and is on track to be delivered not all that far in the future. We're planning to rewrite the GUIs. I wrote both of them 3 years ago, and I haven't really worked on them in 2 years. And they've been maintained by people here and there, but they need some love. And actually, I may retrofit them for 1.5 in a couple, maybe this weekend or something. But that's coming. We have multiple new iOS backends. I believe the WebDriver agent one, or no, the XCUI test one is beta-able right now. I wouldn't say it's usable, in that there are a lot of bugs that we found in Apple's framework that they need to fix before it can make prime time. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. I have a slide about that in a second. There's an Android backend rewrite ongoing to upgrade it to use UI Automator 2, which should make it much more reliable and much faster. we're going to get better docs and onboarding material, and we are going to start an Appium Foundation so that we can have a proper governance structure and we can start taking the contribution more to the community. So Windows support, yes, Windows support exists at the moment in the form of a project called Winium, which takes the Appium protocol, Selenium protocol, and lets you automate Windows desktop apps and Windows Store apps, as long as you're not using there's one framework Microsoft has that you can't use that some people use, where you can write your app in JavaScript. So those don't work currently, I don't believe. They may. You can check out, I'll talk about Winium in a bit. But some other people are working on writing a better implementation at the moment, and it will be supported with the future versions of Windows and Windows mobile operating systems, which is great. I'll leave it at that. There's 2 new iOS backends, and both of these, I believe, are beta-able at the moment. If you're curious, ask people how to get to these. So Facebook WebDriver Agent is a product that doesn't exactly fit the bill of Appium, but we're going to support it because it enables our users to do a lot of things. WebDriver Agent calls the private APIs that underlie the UI automation JavaScript framework and does some interesting things with the simulator. I don't believe it works on real devices, but it allows you to do things you can't currently do with Appium, like automate applications which you don't have the source code for, and automate multiple simulators at the same time. And there's a lot of other things in there that you can do that you can't do with Appium at the moment. And so we're going to add that as one possible backend for you to choose. Much as now for Android, you can choose the Appium backend or the Selendroid backend. You will soon be able to do that for iOS. You'll be able to choose the UI automation JavaScript backend, which is the default, the one we've been using for the last 3 years, the one that I wrote a long time ago. That's been obviously rewritten by other people now. Or you can choose the Facebook WebDriver Agent backend, which would be good if you want to automate multiple simulators or applications outside of yours, like Facebook or something like that. And then there's the XCUI test framework, which is the framework Apple announced at WWDC last year. And we're going to support that as well. And so they're going to deprecate, or they told us they're going to deprecate UI automation in the next version of iOS. And XCUI test is what's there to replace it. So we're already one step ahead. We have the XCUI test implementation. Once Apple fixes some bugs in XCUI test, it will work quite well, but it is implemented properly at the moment. But I would not recommend using it unless your application testing needs are quite simple. So anyways, that will make us future-proof on iOS, and the WebDriver agent will give us all sorts of fun capabilities that we haven't had, that people have been asking for. And with that, I guess let's move on to what I call 10 secrets of Appium, or 10 things you didn't know about Appium. This is a slide deck. I think I've only presented it 3 times, and maybe in the last 3 years, so it's really secret. So you had to have been in one of 3 places to have seen this, but it's some things that a lot of people won't know about Appium that I think are quite cool and quite fun, and so I'm going to share them with you. So the first one is AppleScript. And so this is kind of a silly thing that is for the Mac people, and I'll show you how it works. So let's open Appium up. It's Appium. And let's open the AppleScript editor up. So this is a silly thing. The GUI for Mac is totally AppleScriptable. So if you want to tell the app Appium to start the server, it will do that for you. I'll show you. And you can see that started the server. Let's stop it. You can see it stopped the server. You can also set all the individual settings and preferences, etc. So if you want to automate your CI with the GUI open, a lot of people like to do this because when you hit a problem, you can go straight to the inspector because the GUI will be open. You can do that. So the whole thing is fully AppleScriptable, and if you, actually wrong application, want to see all the different things you can do with it, you can view the dictionary. It comes with Appium. Let's see, let's get this one. And here are all the different things that you can automate with AppleScript. Just a fun thing I did when I was writing the app. So the secret's out. Anyways, that's not that important. Let's move forward. Some more interesting stuff. There are now a whole slew of cloud providers that can sell you Appium in the cloud, some of which sponsor this webinar, others of which don't. But in the last year or so, a lot of people have come on board with it. Sauce Labs has been there since the beginning, as have pretty much TestingBot. Some other ones that come on board. Amazon now supports, via AWS, a device cloud. Perfecto Mobile has a solution. TestObject and TestDroid also do it. So check those out. And it's really cool. There's some other people coming on board who haven't quite got it done yet that I can't talk about, but there's a few more big companies coming on board that are working on supporting Appium in their cloud. So I'm excited to see that it's been sort of adopted around the community. The next one I'm really excited about, and I've shown this to a few people, and there's actually, I think there's a couple people that actually use this, but this project doesn't get a whole lot of love, but it does still work. And it's called Appium for Mac Apps, and I've linked the repo there. So I think when we came out with Appium, the goal was to automate applications and not websites, and so that includes Mac apps and Windows apps. So I'll talk about Winium later, which is a project that can automate Windows desktop apps. But I wrote 2 or 3 years ago this thing called Appium for Mac, which lets you automate Mac desktop applications, and I'll show you an example of that real quick. So let me get my terminal up and go to Appium for Mac, and I need to go to open Xcode project, and I have some examples. So I've written a simple Python script. I'll show you it. Well, let's get down to the part where it actually calls. It's just Selenium code written in Python that's going to automate a Mac app. So let's launch the Appium for Mac server. I'll just build it in Xcode, and we'll see it should be running down here in a second. I'll kill Apple Script Editor. So here's the Appium for Mac server running. And now I will bring up the calculator app and have it do a simple calculation using Appium. So you can see it added 2 numbers together, and now it's checking the answer. Answer is correct. I'll do it one more time for those of you who may not have seen it. So, Selenium protocol automating a Mac app. So I would really like it if some people watching this would give this project some love. I don't have the time to, and I don't work anywhere that makes a Mac app. But it just needs a little performance optimization, and it's really good. And if there's some people who are good with C and Objective-C, they could do that. Actually, I'll do it one more time, and then I have a Safari example, but I won't show it because I don't think it's going to work. It's been unreliable lately. Anyway, there we are. Cool. Let's move on. I'll kill both of you and you. All right. Great. Next one I want to show you is visual testing. And there have always been visual testing tools, but this is one that I think is pretty cool. And I'm going to show you a quick example of what you can do with it. So they're also a sponsor of this meetup. So there are people afterwards that can answer some questions you have about it. But it's called Applitools Eyes, and it lets you test your product for visual changes. So you can add visual validation to existing tests quite simply. You can check for layout changes and things like that. You can make sure that it looks and feels the same, and it does it all with just taking a baseline and looking at changes. And Applitools has a tool set for factoring in which kind of changes you care about, which kind you don't. So I'll show you a quick example of what that looks like, and if for more info, there are definitely some things you can check out. So let's IntelliJ. Right. Yeah. Oh, I forgot to do something. We may need to talk to people afterwards. So here's a simple test we have, and I'll explain how it works and what it does. So in order to enable Applitools Eyes in your test, you just need to make a new Eyes object and configure it. And then whenever you're ready to check something, you just give a reference for what you want to check. And it will check it for changes. And then at the end of the test, it'll report back to you what's happened. So what this test is going to do is it's going to take a website we have at Foodit. We manage restaurant websites for a few hundred restaurants in London. We have a restaurant website builder. That's one of our smaller products that we work on. And so what this test does is it takes the website and it's going to inject some funny changes into it. And then we're going to go into Applitools and see how Applitools picked up the changes and how you could then figure out that there are bugs. So I'll go ahead. I think I need to start the Android emulator for this to work. And I probably need to start Appium as well. Let's go start Appium as well. Good. Get that one open. And then we can kick this test off. So you'll see here, down here, we're just going to use the execute script function in Selenium to modify the DOM a bit, put some errors in there. And then I've already recorded a baseline in advance for these tests, and then we'll go to the website and see what damage we've done. So this is Android. Let's run this test. Let's run the main. Get Genemotion back up front. Cool. So we're going to load the website for a restaurant called Barbecue Grill in Whetstone, England. And we're going to make some changes to it. Here we go. We'll load it in Chrome using the Chrome support that Appium has. Everything all right. So there we go. Is it not unlocked? Let's just give it a second. There we go. What's taking this so long? There we go. All right. We fixed the loading on Android, so it will load quicker in Appium 1.5. So there, we've misspelled barbecue. We've done some other silly things to this page. Now we're going to take photos of it. You'll see that Eyes is scrolling down the page, taking a full page screenshot. The Order Online Now button overlaps. So we should see these errors when we go to the web in a second. All right, I think it's going to inject 2 more errors into the product. Let's see if we can see what these are. Similar one. There we go. This is book a table screen. Word name is now misspelled. We're going to take a screenshot of this. The button is missing its title. There might be other things wrong with it, but Apple Tools will find all of that. And then we've injected this random blue pixel into this page. And some other stuff appears to be missing. So, all right. At the end of this, we're going to get a link that it's going to tell us to go to because it will have failed the visual validation. All right, so if we look back at our tests, it says go to this URL. And so I will go to that URL where we can take a look at what went wrong. So it's actually right here. We can go in and take a look. Hope that goes away. Here we go. So here's a screenshot, and you can see in purple, I'll zoom in, all the things that are different highlighted. So you can see this looks different. This looks different. That's the button where the text is off. And we have options for what we can do. Let's set it back. We can accept the changes and add a new baseline image, or we can go in and we can mark regions we don't care about. So maybe, let's say this is the date or something, or it's something that's going to change a lot. We could go in and we could draw on it and say, this whole thing right here, don't even worry about it. And that way it won't pick up that change. You'll see on the other pages, similar things. I won't go into an in-depth demo, but if you want more, Apple Tools has stuff you can check out. I have a lot of stuff to cover in the next 15 minutes. So here again, we can see that it picked up the missing text on the button. You can see that in purple. Zoom out a bit. And I guess the word name, you can see there's the 2 pink dots there as well. And then lastly, what's wrong with this one? You can see the violet regions, the magenta regions highlighted there as well. Anyways, it's a cool tool set to do visual testing for your app and check little changes like word wrapping and text missing and misspellings and things like that. And so I encourage you to check it out. It's one of the 10 things I wish everyone knew about Appium. So let's move on. I'll go ahead and close IntelliJ. And Android will go away. And we can stop Appium. We can go back to the presentation. All right. Cool. The next thing, this may be the most important slide in this deck. We frequently receive reports that we haven't released a new version of the GUIs, but we don't really need to unless we've changed the GUIs, which we don't do a whole lot of anymore. But you, if you ever want the latest version of Appium with the GUI, can do it yourself, and let me show you how to do it. And actually, I've been doing it all along. So inside Appium, this is the Mac version. I don't have Windows here to show you, but there's a developer settings section. And in here, you can supply an external Appium package path. The normal Appium application comes with a bundled copy of Appium inside the resources folder on the Mac or inside somewhere else on Windows. But if you don't want to use that, you just check this box and then npm install Appium wherever you like on your machine. I've checked it out and built it by scratch. And I have 1.4.16, I believe, built on here, though my GUI is version 1.4.13. And so you can see in all these requests here in Appium, you can see this 1.4.16 right there. I'm running 3 versions ahead of what the app is, and I've done it by just changing where Appium uses as its source for code. So whenever we come out with a new version, if we haven't rebuilt the app, hopefully now that we have CI, this won't happen as much. But even then, if you want to work on the app or you want to make changes or you want to run off an older build, you can do that right here. And you can even change the Node.js version too, and I've done that as well. This shipped with Node 3 point something, and I think I have 5.5 installed on my machine, and I'm using that. Anyway, so sneaky thing, but very useful for when you want to change or you want to patch Appium or something like that. Multiple servers. So this is the one thing a lot of people don't know. And in Appium 1.5, it's supported the same way it's supported with a regular Selenium server, in that you just ask for a new session and you can do another one. But up until now, the only way to do multiple servers was to run multiple copies of Appium, which, because it's written in Node.js, it's lightweight enough where it shouldn't be too taxing on your machine to do. So here's an example Jonathan put together, Jonathan Lips, what you can do with multiple Appium servers, and I'll let you watch. He is using it as a backup band. So he has 5 copies of Appium running, and they are going to play various instruments in his band. And let's take a look.
Turn off the head mic here.
So you can see right there, 4 Android emulators and an iOS simulator.
Check.
And he's about to have the drums on one Android, etc. I'll let you listen. So what's happening here is that we have an Appium script sending all of these drum hits and keyboard presses and lyrics to these apps all at once from one script. 5 copies of the server running on 5 separate ports, one script, with each one instantiated as its own driver object and talking to them independently. So a more extreme example would be this other thing that the guys at Sauce Labs put together called the Appium Jukebox. And what this does is it renders 16-track MIDI files, one instrument at a time, to 16 devices. And I will sort of show you what that looks like. I'll just fast forward it. So here's the server with 16 mobile phones connected to it. 16 Appium servers running, each one playing a track from the MIDI file. You can see these 16 USB cables. And now you can see the 16 phones, each one rendering one channel from the MIDI file. So that's Appium controlling 16 devices at once. Granted, I think most of us lack the USB ports to pull something like that off. I don't want to know what the power draw on that would be. All right, moving forward. Number 4, we have won some cool awards. Open Source Rookie of the Year 2 years ago, and Best Open Source Software Project from InfoWorld. There's since been other awards. But anyways, another one is that we support writing your tests in Objective-C. This is a project I wrote, Selenium bindings in Objective-C. So I don't know, there's nothing really to show you here, but there's that project. It needs a little love. And for Swift bindings, if anyone wants them, it'd be pretty easy to just import this as a library in Swift and then write a wrapper around it. Never gotten around to doing it because I haven't needed it, but if you want Swift bindings, all the logic's there in the Objective-C library. You just need to write basically headers for it and import the project. At the time I tried to do it, Swift was still sort of beta-like, and you couldn't. It was difficult to import an Objective-C library inside a Swift library. It worked quite well inside a Swift application, but if you were building just a reusable library in Swift, it wouldn't like importing another library. I believe Apple's fixed that in the last year or two. But anyways, that's out there for those of you who write iOS tests who are really excited about XUI tests because you can finally write code in Swift or Objective-C. You've always been able to do it in Appium and Objective-C. In fact, the Appium.app uses the Selenium Objective-C bindings to drive the inspector, among other things. The next one I'll show you is a project called Winium, and it's made by some guys in Siberia. A company, I think it's called 2GIS, and it's full Appium support for Windows Phone and Windows Desktop apps. There's the URL to the project. It's an awesome project. Please star and fork all these projects. Tweet about them. I'd love it. These are all things I think are really cool that people have done with Appium that I think you should check out. So I'll show you a video of Visual Studio running an Appium Windows Phone app test. Let's skip forward to where the test starts. So they're running this on an emulator. You can see there's the Windows Phone emulator. It's running Winium, and he's using the Appium bindings for C# to drive a Windows Phone test. So let's see. I think this test just swiped something, if I recall. Yeah, it's swiped. Now it's going to have some text, all using Appium with Winium. But get excited about this, because if you do have to support Windows Phone, which some of you do, there are even greater things coming. But this is really cool. And then here's Windows Desktop apps, same sort of thing. So let's fast forward to where they do this. The calculator. So much like the example I showed you on the Mac, here's the same thing on Windows using Winium, which is a very, very cool project made by some Russians. And lastly, I talk about this one a lot, but I think it's one of the cooler things you can do with Appium. You may have noticed the robot settings panel in the .app. If you haven't, I'll show it to you. There's this little thing right here where you can configure a robot. I'm not going to do a live demo with this. I do have it here in my flat in London, but I'm just going to show you a video from a couple years ago when we first made this thing. Let's do that. So the gist of what Appium is going to do is whenever it receives a tap command, it's going to tell a robot to tap instead of telling the underlying software API to tap. So that's what you're going to see here. It's going to use Twitter.
Now it's going to try to just say OHAI. And that just sent. I think.
So anyways, how does it all work? There's a robot made by a company called Tapster Robotics, which is founded by Soft Labs Jason Huggins, former Soft Labs CTO Jason Huggins, and they make robots that tap phones. And I wrote a layer of integration where Appium can send all its tap commands to these robots. You calibrate the phone. There's an app you put underneath it that just tells you what coordinates you're touching, and it uses Appium to read the coordinates off the screen. The robot lowers his finger down until he touches the screen, until he strikes oil or whatever, right? And then we read the coordinates. We take a north, south, east, west, whatever. We take 2 points, and we can build a translation matrix. And we can convert coordinates in the real world, or I guess coordinates on the phone to coordinates in the real world. The robot knows how to move in the real world. Appium knows about where things are on the phone and the phone's coordinate system using some fancy math, which I understood at one point, some linear algebra. You can translate between the two, and you can have a robot do all sorts of fun things using your existing Appium tests. Anyways, how much time am I left? I'm running low, so I will get to some of the key takeaways from this. So hopefully you learned some cool things that Appium can do that you didn't know about. I don't think a lot of people know about the Mac apps or the Windows apps, so I'm excited to tell people about that. Multiple servers and changing the server version without changing the GUI version is something I wish everyone knew. I feel like they may account for 80% of the forum posts and the issues in the Appium project, Appium.app project, that is. But there's more than that. I guess I've been thinking about it, and I do a different presentation at a lot of conferences on the story of Appium and how it got to be so popular and why it's popular. And so just wanted to talk about that for a bit. So from day one, we've had a clear philosophy and vision. We were supposed to be the Selenium implementation for mobile, right? And we wanted to do it in sanctioned ways. We wanted to support every language out there. And that's what we've done. I showed the philosophy slides earlier. And so we've always tried to be inclusive and foster our community. We support as many languages and platforms as we can. Now Windows, Mac apps, things like that, but also we support writing in the language of your choice. Developers don't want to be forced to learn a language just to write some tests. They want to write the tests the way they write the apps. And test teams that may not know the language the app is written in don't want to have to write the test in that language. So if you work at an Android shop and you want to write UI automated tests, those have to be written in Java. But if your team normally writes Ruby automation, they're going to have to learn Java. If you have like a QA team that writes tests, so all that sort of thing. And I guess lastly, we put like a whole lot of work into it. Like I spend 30 to 45 nights a year in some random hotel room somewhere. I will go anywhere that has me. So if anyone wants to have me, just let me know. I'm on Twitter. I'll link my Twitter at the end. I will go anywhere. I have a few trips planned at the moment, but starting in May, I'm kind of available. I'm in June, July, August, definitely available. And anyways, so like I said, inclusiveness was always important. We'll go anywhere that will have us. At one point, we translated the site into, I think, 9 languages. People volunteered this. We've always supported Mac and Windows. Not always, but after month 3, I finally wedged Windows support in there. And it's stuck since. And so the one other takeaway, I guess I get to do all these talks, and I have about, let's see how many people are here. I have no idea. There are 400 people here. So I have 400 people right now. So if I've learned anything from this whole experience, and I haven't really told the story of how it happened, is this. And it's a Steve Jobs quote. It says that life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact. Everything around you that you call life was made up by people that are no smarter than you, and you can change it, you can influence, you can build your own things that other people can use. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again. And I feel like for Appium, this is exactly the lesson I've learned doing it. When I created it, my first instinct was to go and see what everyone else was doing, and I looked at all these tools, and they were all bad. And I think that's what most people do, is they just see what's out there, and they don't, think to try something else or do something different. You figure, oh, the smart guys over at Google have figured this out, and often they've figured something out, but it may not be what's right for you or what's best for everybody. And so, like I said, I'm no smarter than you. I was just a manager that was tired of getting yelled at every time we lost money because we shipped a bug on mobile. I don't work at a big company. I don't have a lot of training in this sort of thing. I just got into it. And so I encourage all of you, if you have an idea or something you think is important, to go out and share it, to go talk at conferences, to go blog about it, to tweet about it, and share it with people, because it could be quite important. A lot of the things I've shown you, most of it I've had nothing to do with. The Winium project came straight from these guys in Russia that needed this Winium thing to work. They needed Windows automation to work, and they built this thing. The Apple Tools Eyes is a really cool example of what people who have expertise in something I don't, totally adjacent to Appium, have brought to the project. And so I think there's a lot more to be had there. And I think a barrier we have as software engineers is that we just sort of look at what's out there and we don't go and try and make our own thing. So lesson learned is just because it's what everyone's using doesn't mean it's the best thing in the world to use. It doesn't mean that when they created it, they had an epiphany or they spent years of research on it. Usually that's not the case. Actually, it's not the case with Appium either. but anyways, you get the idea. So don't assume that what exists is perfect. It often isn't. And often the people that put it there have no better ideas than you have. And that's what I'd like to encourage people with. So actually, I forgot to put my Twitter in here. Let me open my Twitter. This is all just Appium links. We have a Slack. We have a discussion board. We have a GitHub. We have a website. For me, hopefully there's nothing obscene on my Twitter. This is me. So that's my Twitter. I would like some more followers. I don't actively recruit them. And if anyone wants to be up on here right now, just tweet at me. You'll get live in front of 400 people. Oh, actually, 9 of you already have. Hopefully it's nothing obscene. Anyways, I think that is my last slide. And I think I finished 2 minutes or 3 minutes early. So that leaves a little extra time for questions. So I'm not exactly sure what's about to happen now, but I'm going to take some questions.
Well, I'm back, and I've been collecting the questions people have been asking. So again, if you have questions, I'm monitoring that best I can live right now. but go ahead and submit those over, and we'll just go ahead and get started and ask as many as we can. So here is the first one. Is it possible to run tests on multiple iOS devices in parallel? If yes, can I do it on simulators or can I do it on real devices as well?
In Appium 1.5, it's possible to do it on multiple devices or a device and a simulator, I believe. I wish Jonathan was here to confirm this.
He should be here in a minute, so maybe you're right. Maybe we should hold off on that question because Jonathan's going to come in 3 minutes. So I'll come back to that one.
The short answer is I'm pretty sure it is, but there's some finagling.
Okay, that's fine. We'll ask you a specific question. Does Appium 1.5 provide an improved scope for automating iOS native apps?
An improved scope. I'm interpreting that to mean, are there additional capabilities for automating iOS apps?
I think so, yeah.
And the answer is sort of. Like I said, there is nothing new in 1.5 other than 2 sessions at once. But there are new iOS backends using XCUI tests and using WebDriver Agent. Both of those new backends have additional functionality that's never been seen in Appium. In WebDriver Agent, that would be multiple simulators, apps that you don't have the certificates for or the source code for. In the case of XCUI tests, it's iOS 10 devices and higher, which aren't currently supported by Appium and don't currently exist. There's actually less functionality right now in XCUI tests than there is in UI automation JavaScript, but we assume that Apple will get around to that before the next version of Xcode comes out. That being said, the guy in charge of the UI automation group at Apple resigned recently, and his job is open, so maybe not. But that's, so yes, there are some, but they're in the still currently beta. I guess WebDriver Agent is not beta, that's for real. But yeah, there are some new capabilities there, like multiple simulators and apps you don't control. There's a bunch of other stuff in WebDriver Agent. There is a GitHub link in the slide deck that you can look at to go to that project. And you can just call it via Appium and bring it up as a separate backend, like the way you do for still Android.
Okay, perfect. I wanted to just ask this question, just to be really clear about Appium, for those that are a little bit new. The question is, how free is Appium? Can I use Appium as a tool, in a tool that we're developing, and, you know, will we not be asked for a fee?
Appium is Apache licensed, Apache 2 licensed, so I'm not a lawyer or an expert on that, but it pretty much means you can do a lot of stuff with it, and you're not going to have to pay anybody anything. I've never made a dime from someone for using Appium for anything. Just make sure you obey the Apache 2 license, which is the same thing a lot of other popular frameworks use, and you'll be all right. So in general, I think the answer is probably yes, but I would need to know the specifics of what you're doing with it. But either way, we don't have a bank account, so if you needed to pay us, I don't know how it would happen.
Right, right. That's a fair answer. Jonathan's here, everyone.
Yeah, this is Jonathan. Let's joining you all. Just to piggyback on top of that, yeah, Appium is totally free and open source, so there are no licensing fees. You can even put it into your own software projects and charge other people for them. That's the beauty of it. So yeah, it's completely free.
Cool. We asked this question a little bit earlier, and we were just waiting for you, Jonathan, so we're just going to bring it back up. Is it possible to run tests on multiple iOS devices in parallel? If yes, can I do it on simulators or real devices as well? Yeah.
Right, so the answer is a little bit complex. So it used to be that you could not do that at all, either on simulators or real devices. It looks like with the WebDriver Agent driver that Dan was just talking about, there's probably a way to do this with simulators. The Appium server itself is still not set up to handle multiple concurrent sessions, although that's something we're working on. So for now, in order to achieve concurrency, you need to run multiple Appium servers. And I think some people have gotten concurrency working with real iOS devices. I saw some threads about that. I haven't looked into that myself, but it seems like some of the restrictions that Apple placed on multiple instances of instruments running at the same time have been lifted. And given that WebDriver agent or XUI test driver that we'll be releasing shortly doesn't use instruments, that restriction should also not be in place.
In my understanding, it used to work in the first versions of Appium, and then it was broken in a version of Xcode and then fixed 2 years later by Apple. I think it works.
Okay, sorry, go on.
With multiple real devices, I believe it currently works, but it was a bug that Apple just fixed in the last version of Xcode, and it used to work like 2 or 3 years ago when Appium first came out.
Right.
Great. Next question, this one's actually going to be, I think, for Daniel Putterman that's on the line, who works at Apple Tools. The question is, the visual tool that you were showing, is that for Android only or for iOS as well?
So the visual tool is both for iOS and Android. It's actually platform agnostic. We have an integration with Appium, but we can work with actually any platform, whether it's a native app or a mobile web or just web. So yeah, so it's for both.
Great. Next question. Is there a way with Appium to capture the video of the tests, or will that be a future feature?
Yes, I was just working on an issue that was talking about that 2 days ago. So I can tell you that it will probably not be a feature of Appium, unfortunately. The reason is that screen recording, other things like that, are heavily system dependent and heavily mobile platform dependent. So for Appium to support video recording on, Windows, Linux, and Mac, as well as iOS and Android, would be a maintenance nightmare. So what we're planning to do instead is just add a section to our documentation that points people in the right direction, because this is a problem that has been solved. It's just very system dependent, and compiling the right tools on your system is something that will perhaps take a little bit of effort, but once you've got it set up, you should be able to record either your entire desktop or the simulator screen, or even a video feed coming off of the real device without too much difficulty. But this is something that you'll have to build around your Appium test. So what I'm hoping will happen is that somebody will make, somebody in the Appium community will make packages that do this nicely, that you could just call as part of your test setup and teardown. It won't be part of the Appium core project, but kind of in the Appium ecosystem. I'm hoping that people will share the effort that they've gone through to get to these solutions in the form of other code libraries that you can all use.
I saw a question pop up that I wanted to take.
Great.
Someone asked, can you test sounds with Appium? And the answer is sort of. I worked at Shazam before this, and we recorded our test using QuickTime on iOS, and you can trigger whatever you need to trigger with Appium, and then we were able to analyze the QuickTime video file afterwards using some C libraries. So it's not really supported in Appium, but Appium, the phone has sound when you use Appium, and so you can record it and do whatever you need to do. But anyways, I just thought that was a fun one that I knew the answer to, and I thought I'd take it.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. And another specific question, like in terms of a capability of Appium, is around responsive sites. People are curious if Appium is able to handle that.
Oh yeah, I mean, Appium just runs a mobile device or simulator, so if you load up a website in a mobile simulator or real device, it will show you the responsive version, for the appropriate screen resolution of that website, so you just test it in that version. Appium doesn't have any special support for responsive sites, which is the way it should be. The concept of a responsive website is just one whose design changes to fit the form factor and usability constraints of the device that you're using it on. So you can absolutely use Appium to test the mobile responsive version of your website, and you don't need to do anything special in order to make that happen.
Great. I thought this was an interesting question that kind of takes a little bit more on than just maybe Appium, but I'd be curious what you guys have to say. Somebody asked, is there a reason that DevOps is so interested in Appium, and what is that reason?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the reason that DevOps is interested in Appium is because to do DevOps, you have to automate absolutely everything in your development and build and release pipelines. And so Appium for mobile, if you want to do, quote, DevOps with mobile, you absolutely need something like Appium in order to be the engine for your automated testing. If you don't have automated tests, you can't have an automated build, you can't have, continuous deployment, and all of that kind of stuff. So there are definitely other pieces to, having a successful DevOps pipeline, but if you're talking about mobile, then something like Appium is completely essential as part of it.
Great. Anyone else have something to say? Okay. I see a couple questions coming through in different variations, but it has to do with people who are starting out with Appium and doing iOS automation or even Android, and they're finding that they're having trouble getting started or it's slow. Is there anything we can help them out with in terms of speeding that up and tips around Appium, I guess, for performance?
If they're saying that Appium itself is slow, I guess one thing I would say is to make sure that on the newer versions of iOS that they have installed instruments without delay on a system level. This is something that used to be bundled with Appium, but Apple changed the way that they made their libraries work, so you couldn't include it within Appium itself. Now it's something you have to install in your system. That should get you back some speed on iOS specifically. Otherwise, this is kind of the world that we live in terms of functional testing. It is kind of slow. I'm hoping that some of the new drivers that we're working on, like the XUI test driver or the UI Automator 2 driver and so on, will also come with performance improvements as Apple and Google respectively have hopefully made some of their own tools better, and some of the early reports that we're getting suggest that that will be the case. If they're talking about it being slow to kind of learn and ramp up on the tool, then I would just suggest getting involved with the community, reading all the documentation and tutorials that helpful people have written. And we're going to be doing some work in the near future to take a look at the process of onboarding as a new Appium user, because we know that it's difficult, and we've been working really hard to make Appium a stable, usable piece of software, but we know that we have some work to do with our example code and the documentation, making sure that it's organized appropriately and formatted appropriately, so that no matter what your skill level, when you come in, you'll be able to find the information you need. So I would say stay tuned for those documentation updates. One of the things that I'm really excited about has to do with our sample code, which right now has code for the various languages that support Appium clients in a sort of scattered fashion. And instead, we're going to move towards something which is much more like the old Rosetta Stone, where we have a couple kinds of tests, and we basically re-implement those same tests exactly line by line if possible in each language. So you'll be able to look at all of the sample code and sort of know across different languages what means what, and it should be easier and more clear to get started. So I don't know if you have any other thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out to some of the cloud providers out there. The guys at Test Object have put together some cool material. I would recommend looking at their stuff. And I've seen them at a few conferences giving Appium training sessions, and they do a very good job with it. And I guess that's the other thing. There's conferences around with Appium talks, and so that's a good place to start as well. I'm not immediate help, but yeah.
Great.
We're working on it.
Last quick question here. I know we need to wrap things up, but last question was when is 1.5 going to be available for download? On the website, they saw it was only 1.4 only, so I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're basically in a sort of burn-in process for releasing 1.5. It's been, we felt like it was pretty ready to go for the last month or two now. We're just trying to make sure that it's getting adequate use in the community to flesh out any last-minute bugs, and we have uncovered some things thanks to some of the work from some of the people who are involved in the Appium community. And we really want this to be one of the best releases of Appium from a stability perspective and from a perspective of being bug-free. So we've been taking that extra time. However, we really, really want all of you to start using Appium 1.5 now. There's been, I think we're on beta 13 or 14 at this point. So it's very easy for you to go ahead and get going with Appium 1.5 in its beta form, which is most likely almost identical to what's going to be officially released, in the next couple days, hopefully. So you can use that. You can use the beta by following the instructions for installing from npm. You can just do npm install -g appium apps beta, and it should give you the latest beta. So we really, really want you guys to start pounding on it. Let us know if anything else comes up. But at this point, you should definitely be using the beta in order to figure out if your tests require any changes to work well with 1.5.
Great. With that, we got to go ahead and wrap up, but we really appreciate you talking to everybody today, Dan, and thanks to our guests in the Q&A, Jonathan Lips from Sauce Labs and Daniel Putterman from Applitools. And thanks everyone for joining us. We'll be sending out the recording and the slides in the next couple days. If you have any questions specifically, you can reach me at webinar@saucelab.com, and I'll get you in touch with the right people. Thanks again. Bye.